Wow.
Hey, they have working tricorders now, Thomas, and I want one.
Working tricorders.
No, I'm serious. They have working tricorders now, and I want one.
Well, that's the thing is Star Trek said, here's all this cool stuff, and people are like, I should invent that. And they did. That's why so many medical hospitals, literally some of their designs are based on the fact that Star Trek had them.
The original flip phone.
Yeah. Right.
Star Trek communicator. So,
That's right. That's right. And I know some people that still have them.
I've got one in the drawer somewhere. I should say it's in a box now somewhere.
Right.
So
I actually think I do have one of those left yet, someplace here.
So have you done any more on the robots?
I've been working on them. I actually finished one up earlier today. I couldn't sleep last night, so I was up like at 3 o'clock in the morning finishing one up.
Building a robot?
Well, these are my toy ones, Jeffrey. These are great. But
well, you watch BattleBots, right?
Well, I don't want to tear them up that way. I want to build them and keep them intact.
There's the show BattleBots.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. But a lot of them do have, the ones I'm building now are starting to have microprocessors and stuff in them. But I was fascinated with the stuff as a kid because I was talking to my sister after I did the last show and we were talking about toys, and I said, as kids, there were 3 kids in the family. My dad made like $75 a week. And my mom didn't work, so, I mean, in the 1960s, we're making off of that. So when we were talking about toys, I said, I only remember having a couple toys in my whole childhood, really. Everything was pretty much hand-me-downs as far as clothing goes from one to the other, and I'm at least glad I had an older brother. That I inherited stuff from. So that was a good thing.
Well, on Twitter, there's a joke about how to reference how old you are, and one of my things I pointed out is a new car was $2,000 years old.
A new car was $2,000.
Because back in the 70s, in the early 70s, I remember new cars were about $2,000.
Oh yeah.
1970, I bought a brand new Nova for $2,612.
I bought a Pinto in 1973 for $2,100, and that was a deluxe model.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then I got in a wreck with it, and luckily it didn't burn up. and I bought a Mustang for $3,000.
Yeah, that's about what they was going for back then.
Yeah. But we didn't have much in the way of toys at all. So now I'm going through my second childhood. And I've got 5 3D printers in my office, along with I've restocked a lot of my electronic parts, electronic components, small microprocessing boards, stuff like that. And I'm building a lot of the ones now which are motorized. They work off of like infrared or off my cell phone even. I can control them and manipulate them around using Wi-Fi. And these are kind of really cool. So now I got my second childhood going, but I've got only a couple of them done since the last time I was on your show, Henry. I kind of took a break a little bit. I was doing some projects around the house. And then for a couple weeks, I got trapped going back in the work. They called me back in for a couple projects they had.
Wow. So are you going to eventually build like Robbie the Robot?
Well, you mentioned that. And in my first marriage, this goes back now, I've been divorced now for 16 years roughly on there, 17 years. When I was first started building a few robots back then, and we didn't have 3D printers back then. What I was doing was making molds and then molding fiberglass in these things. And then making some like early prototypes. And I was making this one at the time that was about 20 some inches tall. And the now ex-wife goes, what are you working on? I said, building Robbie the Robot from the movie. And she sees all the mold. She sees the fiberglass. And I'm making the stuff. And she goes, okay. And I was out in the garage doing it. And I made a mistake of saying, she goes, well, what are you going to be doing next? I said, I'm going to be making one a little bit bigger. She goes, how big? I said, well, it's 7 foot. Well, that's when you see the hair stand up on the back of the neck. You're not building no 7-foot robot. And she kind of had a fit because all she saw was dollar signs, and me, I just saw a hobby. That's all I cared about, you know. And I never did build a 7-foot one. But what I'm going to do is I've got some I've worked on now. They're 16 inches tall, so forth. I've made some up 3D along those lines. And I'm going to take a couple of toys that I bought to go back to like the 80s and 90s. And one of them is the Lost in Space robot.
Oh.
It's one of these that the person who had it before lost a remote control for it, and I thought about making a new one. But I got the idea that one of the robots I'm building now is about a 16-inch tall version of it. I'm putting microprocessors in it. I've got the lights all designed, the flash and sequence and so forth, servos and stuff in it. I'm going to take, once I get the 3D one I built, I'm going to adapt the same techniques over to take the toy that's 24 inches tall and do the same thing. Now I just wish I had a bigger 3D printer so I could print one even bigger yet. And just keep going up in scale. But they're fun. They're toys, and it keeps the mind busy the way I look at it at this age, you know?
Now,
So
you've been out in the woods looking for Bigfoot, right?
yeah,
A couple
I
of
hate
times.
to say so. At times, one time I got roped into it. I've gone out a couple times, and the last time was I was doing a talk for a paranormal conference, and they said, "Hey, would you like to go to Skywatch tonight? And you know, you can describe, you know, how to look for UFOs in the sky for a whole group," which was about 30, 40 people, something like that night. About 40 people, I think it was. Now, along the way, what they're also going to do is go Bigfoot hunting. And we walked, I don't know how many miles back in the state park. And I was not really in the shape to really walk that far, but I did it. And when they did the Bigfoot, they were showing me signs on how you can look for Bigfoot. And I'm somewhat the skeptic on a lot of things, not just Bigfoot, but UFOs. I have to go in kind of skeptical and look at things, you know, like, is somebody misinterpreting these things? And they were showing me signs of, you know, limbs broken at certain points, footprints and so forth, possible footprints and stuff. And to me, it's interesting. And there's one thing I look at, there's always been the rumored sometimes connection between Bigfoot and UFOs. That back in the 70s, there were some Bigfoot seen around some UFO sightings, so there could be a potential connection there. So I'm open-minded on that
cough,
side.
$6 million man. Cough.
Yeah. I remember that episode.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh,
That was
so
really
sad.
bad outfit too.
Yeah.
And who was that? Who did that? Was that?
Wasn't
Andre
that
the
Kyle?
Giant.
No, it wasn't Andre the
Richard
Giant.
Kyle?
Richard Kyle. I think.
Kyle. Yeah, okay.
That guy, by the way, was big. I met him once.
Oh.
And he had major back problems at the end of his life from, I believe, an auto accident. And when I met him, I said, you know, Mr. Kyle, I would really like to get a photograph with you. And he goes, well, I can't stand up. And when he did stand up, by the way, Hunter Jeffrey, he stood up next to a guy that was, I'm 6'4". This guy was standing up next to, was way taller than me. But then hunched over, Richard Kyle was like over a full head taller than me, hunched over.
I met John Matuzak years ago before he passed away. He was with the Oakland Raiders, and he was in the movie, a silly little movie with Ringo Starr and Barbara Bach called Caveman. And I barely came up to his armpit, and I'm 5'7".
Oh, well, when I met Kyle, I sat down next to him. He says, "We got to do something for your photograph."
Mhm.
And this is, matter of fact, this is when I was still married to my first wife. He grabs hold of my head,
Oh no!
and his hands were so big, it was like somebody had two baseball gloves on and put them over top of your head. And I'm looking out through the finger holes, basically.
Yikes!
And he goes, "What can we do to make this photograph more interesting?" And my ex-wife's probably thinking at that time, "Wring his neck, would you?"
Oh.
But he had these mammoth hands, but very nice man. The photograph, I don't know whatever happened to it. That's gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
So were you able to hear any Bigfoot calls, anything along those lines?
No, I didn't hear anything. And when we were out. Now, in the 1960s, when I had my encounter with a UFO, my buddy back then told me that the area we were in actually had Bigfoot in that region in South Carolina. And I thought he was BSing me. And then years later, I happened to Google that region and went through the Bigfoot Research Organization. I looked at their database, and there was Bigfoot reported in the region I was at on the same road. So he was telling me about that, and I was kind of looking, telling me there's Bigfoot in that region. I was kind of treating it like a campfire story, but maybe he was right. Maybe there was Bigfoot down in there. Right before the show, too, I was watching some videos, by the way, Barbara, that had Bigfoot in them. And it was some that somebody turned in from Ohio that you heard some cries in the background. And I'm not expert enough on the sounds, and one of the first things I always think of is a coyote, something along those lines.
Well, foxes tend to sound like women being murdered.
Yeah. And I just didn't have enough of my own ability to kind of discern what it really was that they were, I was hearing in the videos. And I also didn't have enough information about where they were at. They just had the video, and I like to know where they're at in Ohio. Because down in an area called Salt Fork, that's a huge state park. That's where it's said to be one of the biggest populations of Bigfoot in Ohio. At least that's what everybody says, and they've got some major conferences down in that area every year regarding Bigfoot.
Now, isn't there a town in Ohio that's supposedly off limits
What?
to people?
Limits?
Yeah. They closed it down because evidently there was some sort of contamination. I can't remember the name of the town now.
Well, there's a town where I believe it was burning coal veins under the
I know
town.
about that.
That's in Pennsylvania.
Oh, is that in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I thought there was one in Ohio.
There's an old town that I know. I haven't ever been to it, but supposedly there was some contamination or something. They made everybody leave the town, and it's just run down now. I don't know what the problem was with it, but you can probably get into it if you wanted to. But there was something supposed to have been wrong with it. I forget what the name of it is.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder, going back to the Hopkinsville goblin thing, where there's areas which they tell you not to go into, and what kind of cover-ups are happening there if the military is involved with it.
Okay, wait a minute, Barbara.
Okay.
Here's a name for you.
Okay.
Helltown.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Patsy.
But it
just
has a different
posted.
town, I think.
Yeah, well, this one, it's, I was Googling it as you were talking. And it's one that basically is supposedly abandoned.
Right.
It's not that far from me, I don't believe. It says it's in the Cuyahoga Valley, which I'm in Cuyahoga County.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.